Hey everyone, I want to thank you so much for joining me on the fourth and final reflections that is being put together for July and August 2021. And these reflections are things that we will do once a year. So we will have a constant year of mysteries once a month being released at the middle of the month. But at the end of the year in July and August, we really need time to put things all together. Now, we always have a formal presentation that happens in the beginning, and that stays on YouTube. But after that, there's a longer presentation where we talk about the expanded ideas. And usually I talk about those expanded ideas with respect to things that have been written in some books, and sort of like a college professor. But those parts are really crucial, and those parts, the full reflections is only contained on farsightprime.com. So the initial part 1 will be on YouTube continually, but the full reflections, which is total of about an hour and a half, that is on farsightprime.com, and I really want to emphasize the importance of the full thing. So I've noticed a couple things that a number of people have sort of been talking about how they really just want the mysteries, and they don't really see the value of the reflections. But that's really short-sighted. If you just go mysteries after mysteries after mysteries, nobody is tying it together. Nobody is explaining why one mystery is related to the other. No one's sort of piecing it all together. So without these reflections, there is no big picture. Now, if you look at the last few reflections we've been talking about, especially with the Sith point of view, but also with respect to the Jedi point of view, the whole idea of serving self versus serving others, nothing works unless there is a vision, unless there is a coherent vision of something you want to achieve. So if we just did mystery after mystery after mystery, it's a lot of adrenaline pulses, boom, 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 but nothing's tying it together into a bigger picture that will help all of us, help all of humanity, help all of evolution. So that's what these reflections are. They're our way of taking everything that we've been doing in projects and sort of piecing it all together. Now, in this particular set of reflections, these 4 reflections in July and August, we're summarizing a lot of stuff that we sort of stumbled upon. We didn't expect there to be a lot of extraterrestrial content in a lot of the mysteries that we started. Like, we didn't really expect a lot of extraterrestrial content in one project after the next, where there were just ruins, and when we were doing Zeus and when we were doing Ra, we really didn't know what we were going to be getting. Puma Punku, the Nazca lines, we didn't expect extraterrestrial content with some of that stuff. So when we got it and we saw how consistent extraterrestrials have been manipulating the human environment, the culture, it took us a long while to sort of figure out what was going on. And I cannot emphasize enough how long the conversations went into the night, talking about it, figuring it out, piece after piece after piece. And finally we said, we finally figured out what was going on, that there was actually an ongoing prison planet, something that started in real force way back in the old Egyptian days. It probably went on before that, but in the old Egyptian pyramid days, that's when the formal prison guards, wardens were sort of disrupted and they went into underground hiding. But that started then, and then we've had a gradual loosening up of the society to the point where we have technology again. We have our buildings that don't look like ancient pyramids, but rather look like regular buildings that house people and produce shelter and things like that. And we have technology now that's growing. All of that would not have been allowed in the old empire days when the whole prison planet was in a real serious lockdown situation. So there's been a change in what's been going on the planet. But on the other side, we really didn't. We also noticed that there's a continual effort to disrupt things, and the shield that's around the planet, the so-called death traps, those are still there. So there's still ongoing efforts to keep the planet sort of contained. And when you see disruption after disruption after disruption in the news, from diseases to awful situations that you see in countries all over the place where there's violence going on and revolutions and changes of government, the planet seems to never really settle down. So somebody in our view, is in a constant state of changing things. So we had to take all of this and sort of piece it all together so that other people could understand the conclusions that we were getting that were the result of night after night after night till 4 in the morning discussions trying to piece everything together. So these reflections are a way to sort of tie all the pieces together without having you to go through endless nights of discussion, like what about this, what about that, how does everything fit in? Now this reflections is really special, and I'm afraid that some people may not get it, may not really understand it, but it is one of the most important. And it only really makes sense after the first 3 reflections. So seeing those in their entirety is really crucial. But this reflection allows us to talk about where we're going and what our human condition is going to be in the future. I have said often at Farsight that we have found that the prison planet is ongoing and people want to know how to escape. But this is the problem. Even if we had a doorway that you could walk through and escape from a prison, where would you go? You'd go right back out into the galaxy that sent you here in the first place. So there really is no escape to like a nice place. It's really screwed up out there in the galaxy. It's not okay. And so if we're to resolve this situation, we have to say, who are we and what do we really want to do? So there is only one solution, and that is we not only have to break down the prison walls, but we have to change the galaxy. We cannot walk away from that. And we have to understand that that is possible because we are a very unique species. We have been forged in a furnace, in a prison. A prison that forced people from different cultures and different backgrounds and different colors and races and all types of things and belief systems all together to learn how to tolerate one another. And that's what's not visible out there in the galaxy. We are really unique, but there's other things that are unique as well. And I'm going to be going through that after the formal presentation, and I'm going to be tying it together with something that is my favorite of all time authors, Isaac Asimov, in the Foundation Trilogy. Isaac Asimov wrote the Foundation Trilogy, and it was a very fundamental series of books in my life. I think I was probably guided, you might say manipulated, to reading those when I was just beginning graduate school. And they really fundamentally changed my orientation in graduate school. The Foundation novels basically blend 2 things together. Mathematical modeling in order to understand the complexity of nonlinear evolution from a mathematical perspective, combined with psychic stuff, the ability to perceive things psychically and also manipulate things psychically. Those 2 things combined produce a science that Isaac Asimov called psychohistory. So I'm going to be talking about that after the formal presentation. But the formal presentation gets us started, and it's really interesting, and it helps to go into the thinking process of those who serve others, the so-called Jedi, how they look at life, how they look at society, what causes them to jump into things. So we're going to start with that. You're really going to like the presentation. It's not long, it's about 20 minutes, but it really captures a huge amount of content that we're going to be able to use later. And then I will dive into the second part of the reflections, which is connecting that to an example of Isaac Asimov's novels that help us to make it real, to help us to make it understandable in terms of a story that was told that relates to us. I personally think that there are a few authors that have written books and then produced movies sometimes that thought they were just doing things independently, but in reality they were being sort of fed information. I think Isaac Asimov was one of those. And I think in the early years I was sort of led into reading his stuff. I communicated with him briefly before he died. It was not much, but it was great just to be able to say I touched base. And then when we talked about the last book, Darth Plagueis, I actually mispronounced Darth Plagueis. I was saying it Darth Plagueis, but it's Darth Plagueis. And some of the people who watched it made comments about my pronunciation. In fact, I did check it, and in fact, I was mispronouncing it. But nonetheless, it was a very interesting presentation that allowed me to focus on the logic of the service to self. So here is the logic of the service to others and what they actually go through. But they don't use game theory and rational choice theory like we got with the example, the metaphorical example of looking at the Darth Plagueis and that perspective. This is the example that uses a different approach, completely a different theoretical approach. And you're going to love it. You're going to really be interested in it. So without further ado, we begin. Hi everyone, this is Reflections number 4, the fourth in a series of presentations published in the summer months of July and August 2021. Presentations that are designed to help pull together a long series of remote viewing projects done here at Farsight involving extraterrestrials. Now, this reflection focuses on politics as it is practiced by extraterrestrials who are trying to help humanity out of its current predicament of existing in a planet that is set up as a prison system in this galaxy that serves what we at Farsight like to call the Old Empire. Such politics are also practiced by some human leaders, such as Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela, Gandhi, and the like, although it is more rarely used among human leaders currently due to the fact that so much of human leadership has been compromised by the oppressive extraterrestrials running the planet as a prison. Now, to simplify things, let's call the extraterrestrials who are trying to help humanity the freedom lovers, and the extraterrestrials who are currently running Earth as a prison, the oppressors. In my last reflections, number 3, I explained the logic behind the way the oppressors think, and in this reflections, number 4, I explained the logic behind the way the freedom lovers think. Once you understand both ways of thinking, you will fully understand where we are as a human civilization living on this planet. It is way more complicated than you may think. So this explanation will really help show you where we are and why. Fundamentally, the freedom lover extraterrestrials think in terms of serving others. And metaphorically, one can compare them to the Jedi in Star Wars, people who fight to help others. Now, the oppressors, on the other hand, are like the Sith, in the sense that they serve themselves using a complex logic that I explain in Reflections number 3. But now, the freedom lovers, or metaphorically, the Jedi. What makes them think the way they do? Obviously, they want to serve others, and they sacrifice themselves to a considerable extent in order to do this. They definitely do not think in the way that the oppressors think. The oppressors think in terms of maximizing benefits for themselves, and they seek to rule others because they consider their vision of how society should be governed to be better than anyone else's vision. For the oppressors, free will produces absolute chaos because everyone is running around trying to maximize their own benefits, and no one is looking to create a big picture idea of how society should be run. Oppressors often end up as fascistic leaders who cause a lot of suffering as they force others to bend to their will. On the other hand, the freedom lovers do indeed like to promote the idea of free will for all individuals, as long as this free will does not compromise the free will of others. The freedom lovers like the idea of democratic governance, where representatives of various groupings in a society sort out compromise agreements on how to govern. So, focusing on the freedom lovers, it is crucial to understand that they have an outward-looking view of the world. They do not think in terms of themselves such that their benefits are maximized. Rather, they think in terms of what would be best for others. Moreover, they keep a focus on what is happening to others. When others are suffering, they feel the pain of those people as if it is happening to themselves in some way. Their goal then is to relieve the suffering of others. But for our purposes, the key point is that they look outwardly to sense what others are feeling. Metaphorically, the Sith, or those who serve the self, never do this. To the Sith, it does not matter what others feel. The only thing that matters is whether the Sith is arranging the world in such a way that his or her own vision of how the world should work is succeeding. The Sith never cares about the visions of others since the masses have so many visions, mostly conflicting and always confusing. The only vision that matters is the vision of the person or group who controls things. But for the Jedi way of thinking, what matters most is the individualized visions of the many, and helping as many people as possible pursue their own dreams is what matters. The Jedi are not concerned about the single big picture vision that someone may have, since to achieve that big picture vision, the visions of many other people would have to be canceled, often violently. To examine how the thinking process works for the freedom lovers, we cannot use the same type of theoretical approach that we use with the oppressors. With the oppressors, we use an approach known as game theory, where each person is trying to win maximum benefits, selfishly or internally defined. But with the freedom lovers, the conceptualization is external, not internal. The focus is on others, not the self. So, to explain the way the freedom lovers think, it is best if we approach the problem using probability. You see, freedom lovers look outside of themselves to evaluate what is happening to the world. They see people interacting with other people, and when those interactions produce significant collective pain, the freedom lovers wonder if it would be worthwhile for them to do something to reduce that pain. So they look at the world from the perspective of what others are doing to others. Well, what others do to others is probabilistic. That is, when two people interact, there is a certain probability that some type of result will occur. One person may greet the other person, and the result may be a nice conversation. On the other hand, one person may pull a gun out and rob the other person, or worse. So there is a probability for that happening as well. Basically, all interactions result in probabilities of various responses, and people interact, and something happens as a result of those interactions. And what happens is a probabilistic thing. There's a probability associated with it. Now, freedom lovers are particularly concerned when a high degree of interactions of others with others produces horrific results. For example, in situations involving genocide, war, mass rape, there is great collective pain that results from the interaction of the perpetrators with the victims. When the probability is high that such tragic events may occur, the freedom lovers often kick into high gear in order to intervene. In the case of billions of people being incarcerated on Earth, as is happening now, continually recycling between lives after being mind-wiped and brainwashed, that is a big deal for the freedom lovers. So the interaction, even if indirect, between the masses and the oppressors has a high probability of having a terrible result for a lot of people, at least from the perspective of the masses. And the freedom lovers do not like that. So the freedom-loving extraterrestrials have been trying to figure out a way to best help humanity out of its current dilemma. The big problem is that the freedom lovers respect free will, and up until very recently, humans have not been asking for help. The prison system on Earth works by erasing the memories of people after they die, and then brainwashing them into believing all sorts of ridiculous stuff, like they need to return to Earth in order to learn a lesson and other such garbage. The humans don't even remember that they are in a prison. So exactly how are the freedom-loving extraterrestrials supposed to help people who do not even know that they need help? No one can count on traditional human leadership to ask for help since it has been so totally corrupted. So, from a freedom lover's perspective, where free will is one of the highest principles to live by, helping humans requires a leap of faith. Faith that the humans really want help even though they do not know that they want help. Do you see the dilemma? So, what we have done at Farsight is to create videos where we use remote viewing to show people the true history of human civilization on Earth, a history that has been very carefully hidden from the masses. The true history of humanity has continuing extraterrestrial manipulation as a constant and major feature. Everything has been influenced by the oppressor extraterrestrials. Everything. Moreover, the manipulation has been very successful. Humans in general do not know what has happened to them, and they do not understand their current dilemma. So our job at Farsight is to chip away at the false memories and incorrect information that humans are fed until we get to a tipping point where humanity is going to wake up. After that, the momentum of the change will be unstoppable and rapid, but we have to get close to the tipping point first. By publishing new information that explains what has happened to humanity in the past, humanity as a collective body slowly moves as a group to a new conceptual place. They start thinking differently. Evidence of this conceptual movement is easy to spot. More and more of the masses start to reject what is told to them by traditional political leadership. Leadership that the masses know has lied to them far too often in the past. So even if some current advice that human leadership is offering is correct, many people will not believe it. Once people have been lied to enough, there comes a point where leadership begins to lose control over their populations. Even giving correct advice at that time may not work, no matter how valuable the advice. It's the fact that many people are not believing nearly anything that traditional human leadership is telling them that is the telltale sign that major change for the overall society is a greater possibility. So if Farsight had existed and had published its project, say, 100 years ago, humanity was not ready to believe the information. Farsight could have published 1,000 projects and it would not have made any difference. But the current signs are that humanity is moving away from unconditional acceptance of the proclamations of traditional human leadership. So it makes sense for Farsight to publish its many projects now. You see, we have two very different results that are alternate future paths for humanity. The first is that humanity continues to be duped by the oppressors and continues to live as prisoners or slaves on a prison planet. But the second is that humanity begins to reject the leadership of contemporary nations, and thus humanity is starting to look elsewhere for guidance. Given that we have two very different possible outcomes existing, with probabilities associated with each possible outcome, we can say that there exists two separate equilibria. One is located where humanity is now, still stuck in the process of being incarcerated by extraterrestrials and lied to by human leadership. But the other equilibrium is where humanity throws out belief in traditional human leadership completely and suddenly realizes where it is and how it got here. Such a situation is commonly described in nonlinear mathematics as having two equilibria. And there is a tug of war between those two equilibria in terms of what happens next. When humanity is still under the sway of one equilibrium, then it stays within the basin of that equilibrium. But remember the story of the blade of grass that broke the camel's back. That last blade of grass was too much for the camel, and it collapsed. Well, mathematically, the camel rocketed from one equilibrium to another, from standing up to collapsing to the ground. The point where the sudden change happens is called a singularity, or bifurcation set, and it is where the old system can no longer maintain its stability. It is like a line in the sand at the beach. You stay under the influence of one attractor until you cross the line in the sand. And at that point, as soon as you cross the line, you get sudden change. Now, there are two ways to think about sudden change. The first is that you have one system set up and that system collapses. And then you need to set up a different model to describe the new system. Before the rapid change, you can say that the system was synchronic, in the sense that the change within the system was gradual, incremental, and the system itself did not change in any structural way. But once the sudden change happens, you need a new model, or at least a much more complicated model. Then you have a system of diachronic change. So on one side of the bifurcation set, humanity has firm belief in traditional thinking. But on the other side of the bifurcation set, support for traditional thinking is nowhere to be found. The former belief system has been totally or near totally disregarded, and a new system begins. That new system begins to grow and stabilize, and finally, it is safely grounded and not under threat of attack. And at that point, we are back with synchronic change, but in a new conceptual place. stability in a new world. So now I can explain why Farsight is publishing so many remote viewing studies regarding past extraterrestrial involvement with Earth and humanity. We are doing this now because we believe our society is hovering near a bifurcation set, where sudden change is possible if humanity can just be nudged a bit more in the direction of accepting the new and truthful information regarding consciousness and human history. If humanity is not near that bifurcation set, then it would not be a worthwhile thing for us to do what we do at the current time. But if humanity is near that bifurcation set, then great change is possible with relatively minor effort on our side. That is where we think we are. And that is why we do what we do today, including the publication of our videos regarding public negotiations with extraterrestrials. If humanity is not close to the bifurcation set, that could enable humanity to cross quickly from being an ignorant slave population to a very woke population, then it would make no sense for freedom-loving extraterrestrials to do anything to help humanity either, since it would not make sense for Farsight or anyone else to expect any significant change in humanity's situation. Consider the case of Jesus. When Jesus came to this planet, he spread a very different message than the ideas that dominated the society of his day. But he knew that humanity was not near any bifurcation set that could cause it to rapidly flip from one set of beliefs to another. So his job was simply to insert those ideas into the public discussions and then to wait a long, long time for the ideas to have significant effect. But we believe our situation at Farsight is different. And we think that humanity is close to the bifurcation set that could result in a major and rapid change in thinking on this planet. It is because we believe humanity is in this delicate state of being near the bifurcation set that it is worth it for us to push forward with our remote viewing work. Now you can understand why the mainstream continues to ignore or ridicule the results that we obtain here at Farsight, and why open discussions of remote viewing and extraterrestrial life are still forbidden in mainstream venues. When you are in the basin of an attractor, all the supportive elements for that attractor reside within, and thus dominate the phase space of that attractor. It's one of those when in Rome, do as the Romans do kind of thing. Think of being caught in the pull of a black hole in a science fiction movie. Everything is pulling you down towards the center of the hole. Nothing is moving away from the hole. If you were to try to move against the pull of the hole, it would require an enormous amount of energy, and indeed it may not be possible to escape the black hole. But let's say you are near a place where another black hole opens up, and you have two competing black holes in front of you. You may not be able to move directly against the pull of the first black hole, but you may be able to nudge your position to be a bit closer to the second black hole. If you can nudge your position just enough to get you into the basin for the second black hole, you could cross the border between the two black holes and escape from the first black hole by diving into the second black hole. That is sort of a dramatic science fiction picture, but I think it illustrates the point well of where humanity is at the moment. Humanity is near the border between two black holes, and Farsight is trying to nudge humanity out of the basin of attraction for the first black hole, where the only future is continued imprisonment, into the basin of attraction for the second black hole, where the future is freedom. So, back to the way the freedom lovers think. The freedom lovers look at these macro-social movements. They chart the currents. They look for the attractors and estimate the size of their basins of attraction. They respect free will, so they will not pull someone out of a basin of attraction unless it is clear that the person does not want to be there and ask for help in relocating. The freedom lovers don't make the decision for you of where you should best be located, since that would make them like the oppressors. Metaphorically, the Sith will decide for you where they think you should be. But the Jedi will respect your choice of where you decide to be, even if that decision is to remain a slave. So if the freedom lovers are going to help humanity, the best they can do is to offer an alternative pathway, a pathway to freedom. But humanity has to make some effort to choose that pathway. The freedom lovers are not going to kidnap humanity and force it to go somewhere against its will. Humanity has to make at least some effort to choose a new path. And that is what we are trying to assist with by publishing our public negotiations with extraterrestrials. The public negotiations are an attempt to show that humanity is making an effort to choose a new path. Whether or not it is enough for an effort to persuade the freedom-loving extraterrestrials to intervene in a sufficiently forceful manner is something we all will have to wait and see.